What if everything you've been taught about your limitations was never truly real? What if, hidden beneath the surface of your everyday struggles, there existed a truth so powerful that it could completely reshape the way you see yourself and the world around you? The psalmist once declared, "You are God's," and Edgar Cayce insisted this was not merely a poetic line of scripture, but an unshakable reality, waiting to be rediscovered. Has this ever happened to you? Feeling as though there's something greater inside you, something vast and luminous, yet just beyond your reach? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you and awaken a vision of yourself that you never dared to embrace. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Your presence and energy are part of this shared journey, and together, we form a community of seekers daring to think beyond ordinary boundaries. Cayce's teachings remind us that the divine spark is not something distant, reserved for saints or prophets, but a living essence within each soul. When the psalmist proclaimed, "You are God's," it was an invitation to remember that divine creation belongs to all, not a select few. Jesus himself confirmed this truth. The power to create, to shape, and to transform is universal. And yet, how often do we go through life believing the opposite, trapped by fear, doubt, and the illusion of separation? Have you ever caught yourself whispering a silent prayer that felt more like begging than connecting? Cayce explains that true prayer is not about pleading with a distant deity, but about affirming divine reality, standing firmly in the knowledge that the invisible shapes the visible, and that your thoughts are the blueprint of your world. Imagine for a moment that every thought you've entertained was a seed, destined to take root and grow into form. How different would your inner dialogue be if you knew that visible life obeys invisible patterns, that the outer world is simply a mirror of the inner one? This is the very essence of aligning with divine consciousness. It's not about magical thinking or wishful illusions, but about understanding and practicing the spiritual law that underlies all existence. Cayce emphasized that when we recognize this law and work with it, we step into our role as co-creators with God. And, in doing so, we awaken a sense of authority, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that liberates. Think about it. How would your daily struggles shift if you no longer believed yourself powerless? If instead of repeating old fears, you began affirming the truth of your own divinity? You might say to yourself, "I am more than this body, more than this circumstance, more than this fleeting challenge." And each time you affirmed it, you'd be planting seeds of truth in the fertile soil of your subconscious. Slowly but surely, the garden of your reality would begin to change. Isn't it fascinating how a single shift in thought can ripple through every area of life? Health, relationships, opportunities, even the quiet way you carry yourself through the day. So as we continue, I invite you to keep this thought alive in your heart. You are not separate from the divine. You are not excluded from creation's abundance. You are not a beggar before the throne of God. You are an heir, a child of infinite possibility, a being designed to reflect the creative intelligence of the universe itself. Stay with me, because in the next part, we will go even deeper into how this principle unfolds and how you can begin to live it, moment by moment, thought by thought. If these insights are resonating with you, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this journey. What if everything you've been taught about your limitations was never truly real? What if, hidden beneath the surface of your everyday struggles, there existed a truth so powerful that it could completely reshape the way you see yourself and the world around you? The psalmist once declared, "You are God's," and Edgar Cayce insisted this was not merely a poetic line of scripture, but an unshakable reality waiting to be rediscovered. Has this ever happened to you, feeling as though there's something greater inside you, something vast and luminous, yet just beyond your reach? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you and awaken a vision of yourself that you never dared to embrace. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Your presence and energy are part of this shared journey, and together, we form a community of seekers, daring to think beyond ordinary boundaries. Cayce's teachings remind us that the divine spark is not something distant, reserved for saints or prophets, but a living essence within each soul. When the psalmist proclaimed, "You are God's," it was an invitation to remember that divine creation belongs to all, not a select few. Jesus himself confirmed this truth. The power to create, to shape, and to transform is universal. And yet, how often do we go through life believing the opposite, trapped by fear, doubt, and the illusion of separation? Have you ever caught yourself whispering a silent prayer that felt more like begging than connecting? Cayce explains that true prayer is not about pleading with a distant deity, but about affirming divine reality, standing firmly in the knowledge that the invisible shapes the visible, and that your thoughts are the blueprint of your world. Imagine for a moment that every thought you've entertained was a seed, destined to take root and grow into form. How different would your inner dialogue be if you knew that visible life obeys invisible patterns, that the outer world is simply a mirror of the inner one? This is the very essence of aligning with divine consciousness. It's not about magical thinking or wishful illusions, but about understanding and practicing the spiritual law that underlies all existence. Cayce emphasized that when we recognize this law and work with it, we step into our role as co-creators with God. And in doing so, we awaken a sense of authority, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that liberates. Think about it. How would your daily struggles shift if you no longer believed yourself powerless? If instead of repeating old fears, you began affirming the truth of your own divinity? You might say to yourself, "I am more than this body, more than this circumstance, more than this fleeting challenge." And each time you affirmed it, you'd be planting seeds of truth in the fertile soil of your subconscious. Slowly but surely, the garden of your reality would begin to change. Isn't it fascinating how a single shift in thought can ripple through every area of life? Health, relationships, opportunities, even the quiet way you carry yourself through the day? So as we continue, I invite you to keep this thought alive in your heart. You are not separate from the divine. You are not excluded from creation's abundance. You are not a beggar before the throne of God. You are an heir, a child of infinite possibility, a being designed to reflect the creative intelligence of the universe itself. Stay with me, because in the next part, we will go even deeper into how this principle unfolds and how you can begin to live it, moment by moment, thought by thought. When we speak of aligning with divine consciousness, it is not about adopting complicated rituals or memorizing rigid formulas, but about a shift in awareness so profound that it redefines how you see yourself and the world around you. Edgar Cayce often pointed out that thinking like God does not mean inflating the ego or claiming superiority. It means discovering the hidden truth of your inner design, realizing that within you lies the key to every locked door. This is not an abstract idea. It is a living reality that begins the moment you allow your mindset to step beyond fear, limitation, and old patterns. Transformation starts behind the scenes of thought, in that quiet decision to replace doubt with certainty, worry with vision, and resentment with love. You carry within yourself the image of the Creator, a reflection so powerful that even when forgotten, it continues to shape the course of your journey. To be made in God's image is not only a poetic phrase from sacred texts, it is a reminder that you hold the seed of omnipotence, the imprint of divine intelligence. Think about this. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every thought you entertain is not just passing air. It is a spark that carries weight, resonance, and consequence. It is as though the universe itself is listening and responding to the vibration you decide to send out. And this is why Cayce emphasized that spiritual empowerment is not external, but an unfolding of what is already inside. The revelation is not that you must become something greater, but that you must awaken to what you already are. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because one of the most overlooked but transformative aspects of spiritual life is the power of imagination. Think of how effortlessly a child plays at the beach, building castles, with radiant excitement, only to see them washed away by the tide. And yet, the child does not cling to despair. They simply build again, with the same joy, the same certainty that creation is endless and new. This is the mindset Cayce highlighted as essential. The law that ideas always precede form, that thought always carves the path for manifestation. Children live with a freedom that adults often lose, because they do not worship the ruin of the castle. They rejoice in the act of creation itself. As adults, however, we too often confuse loss with identity. We mourn the tide as if it has stolen who we are, forgetting that the creative power remains untouched. The hidden truth is that the tides of life will always come and go, dismantling certain forms, dissolving certain chapters, clearing certain stages. Yet the seed of creation remains intact inside you. The sand may shift, the water may rise, but the capacity to imagine, to build, to shape again, this is eternal. And here lies the real impact of aligning with divine consciousness. It restores not only hope, but creative freedom. When you grasp this, a subtle but profound change begins to happen. You stop fearing endings, because you know they are only transitions. You stop clinging to appearances, because you understand that what seems lost can be rebuilt, and often in even greater form. And above all, you rediscover that quiet certainty children naturally carry, the trust that life responds to imagination, that nothing is final unless you declare it so. This is not about ignoring reality, but about seeing beyond its surface, perceiving the revelations that exist behind the scenes of every circumstance. So let me ask you, does this make sense to you? If it resonates, write in the comments, "I'm also on this path." When most people hear the story of Eden, they imagine perfection shattered, a paradise forever lost because of a single decision. But Edgar Cayce revealed a hidden truth that changes everything. The so-called fall of man was not the destruction of divine order, but a shift of attention. Humanity did not lose its essence. It simply turned its gaze away from unity and became fascinated by appearances. And that single shift created an entirely new experience, one filled with struggle, limitation, and the constant search for fulfillment outside of the self. Imagine the impact of this revelation. What if the exile was never about being cut off from God, but about forgetting to look within? The paradise was never destroyed. It was only overshadowed by distraction. Think of how often in daily life attention becomes fragmented. We scroll, we compare, we chase, all while believing that the answers are out there somewhere, in the next possession, the next relationship, the next accomplishment. Yet the more we fixate on appearances, the further we drift from the still point of unity that lives at the center of the soul. Eden, in this sense, is not a story from the distant past. It is a mirror held up to our mindset right now. Struggle begins when we believe we are separate, when we forget that the river of divine energy has never stopped flowing through us. The transformation comes the moment attention is reclaimed and redirected to the source. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because discovering our divine heritage is like a beggar suddenly learning he has always owned vast lands. The wealth was there all along, but until the inheritance was acknowledged, he lived in rags, begging at the roadside. Humanity walks a similar path, wandering in lack, unaware that it is surrounded by abundance of spirit, wisdom, and strength. Recognition changes everything. The moment a person remembers they are a child of God, the shift in identity begins to ripple outward into decisions, relationships, and even the quiet way they hold themselves in the world. It is not arrogance, it is alignment. To live as an heir of divine life is not to boast, but to step into the natural order that has always been. And this is why Cayce pointed so often to the words of Jesus, "The Father in me does the works." Those words are not just about one man 2,000 years ago. They are a blueprint for understanding the relationship between cause and channel. God remains the source, the great cause behind all life, while humanity serves as the vessel through which that cause is expressed. This perspective is liberating, because it removes the burden of having to manufacture miracles by sheer willpower. You do not need to generate the light. You only need to keep the window clear enough for it to shine through. The moment ego tries to claim authorship, exhaustion sets in. But the moment one understands that they are the channel, the flow of divine intelligence begins to move naturally, like water through a stream bed. Behind the scenes of every human effort lies this same principle. The artist paints, but the inspiration arises from a place beyond technique. The healer lays hands, but the life force itself does the restoring. The leader speaks, but the truth that moves hearts is carried from a higher realm. Once you begin to see this pattern, you realize the decisions you make each day are less about forcing outcomes and more about allowing alignment. Struggle happens when you fight to be the cause. Peace begins when you rest as the channel. And so the journey continues, not as a climb towards something new, but as a remembering of what has always been. If this resonates with you, put down in the comments, "This makes sense to me." When Cayce spoke about authority over thought, he wasn't describing a rigid discipline or some cold mental control. He was pointing to the quiet but powerful realization that your mind is not meant to be a battlefield ruled by fear, resentment, or self-doubt. To live as a child of God is to recognize that every thought carries energy, every feeling radiates influence, and every inner decision leaves an imprint on the unseen layers of reality. This is where transformation begins, not with dramatic external changes, but with the subtle mastery of what is allowed to take root inside. Fear will always whisper. Resentment will always try to take space. But when you stand in the truth of your divine nature, those voices lose their authority. You realize that thought is a tool, not a master. And once that shift happens, something extraordinary takes place. Your self-concept rises. You no longer see yourself as a random participant in life's chaos, but as a center of divine expression, a living channel through which higher intelligence can flow. This elevated mindset is not inflated pride. It is the recognition of who you really are behind the scenes of conditioning and limitation. When you start to view yourself as a divine center, the outer world responds in kind. Circumstances, opportunities, and even people begin to align differently, as if the hidden truth of your inner stance is being mirrored outward. The impact is tangible. You find more clarity in your decisions, more grace in your relationships, more strength in the face of obstacles. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because with this elevated awareness comes responsibility. Cayce often reminded that being a child of God is not just a privilege, but a role that carries weight. Every thought you choose, every emotion you nurture, ripples beyond your private life into the collective. The energy of bitterness spreads just as surely as the energy of compassion. This means that your inner choices are not small. They are contributions to the larger atmosphere of humanity. To consciously choose love, then, is not sentimental. It is revolutionary. It is an act that shifts the current of thought on a collective scale, even if unseen. Think for a moment about the journey of humanity, about how much of our history has been shaped not just by physical events, but by the invisible current of ideas, beliefs, and fears that preceded them. Wars, conflicts, and divisions were born in minds before they erupted on battlefields. And in the same way, reconciliation, healing, and breakthroughs are born in the quiet soil of thought before they blossom into visible impact. This is why Cayce pressed so strongly on the responsibility of inner life. If you carry the seed of divinity, then you also carry the creative responsibility of what you release into the world. This truth is both liberating and sobering. It liberates, because it means you are never powerless. Your thought is always a contribution to creation. And it sobers, because it means indifference or negativity has consequences far beyond what you see in the moment. The hidden truth here is that your most private mindset is already participating in the unfolding story of humanity. When you choose forgiveness instead of resentment, vision instead of despair, faith instead of fear, you are not only shaping your own life, you are weaving new threads into the fabric of collective consciousness. And so the journey deepens. To carry authority over thought is to guard the sacred gateway of the mind. To elevate your self-concept is to honor the divine image you reflect. and to accept creative responsibility is to walk with the awareness that your inner life has an impact far greater than you might imagine. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "I choose love." Divinity, Cayce explained, doesn't begin with thunder or spectacle. It begins invisibly, quietly, like a seed pressed beneath the soil. Within that seed lies an entire oak, branches that could one day stretch into the sky, roots that could anchor into the depths of the earth. But at first, nothing is seen. The hidden truth of spiritual growth is that greatness always starts in silence, in the unseen layers of thought and feeling. Just as an oak seed contains immeasurable strength within its small shell, so too does the soul carry within it a potential far beyond what appearances suggest. And yet, the unfolding of this inner divinity requires nourishment, the water of right thought, the sunlight of right feeling, the soil of consistent attention. Without these, the seed remains dormant, never awakening to its true design. This is why Cayce compared the work of the mind to gardening. Positive thought is not a one-time decision, but a daily practice, a cultivation that requires patience and constancy. You don't plant a seed once and walk away, expecting fruit. Forever. Weeds return. Storms come. The ground dries out. In the same way, fear, resentment, and doubt creep back into the garden of the mind if left unattended. Transformation is not about avoiding weeds, but about refusing to let them dominate the soil. Each day, through conscious choices, you clear space for truth to grow stronger. And the impact of this consistency is profound. It shapes the way you interpret challenges, the way you carry yourself in uncertainty, the way you respond to the hidden pressures of life. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the relationship between faith and abundance reveals just how powerful the inner garden can be. During crises, when appearances scream of lack, when logic insists that nothing can change, faith acts as the invisible force that cracks open new possibilities. Cayce taught that divine abundance is not something earned by effort, but something affirmed by recognition. It is already present, like a reservoir waiting, behind the scenes, unseen until the right channel is opened. When you affirm abundance, even in the shadow of scarcity, you align your thought with the flow of creation itself. This alignment doesn't deny reality, it transforms it. Doors appear where before there were only walls, ideas surface that solve problems logic could not, and strength arises that seems to come from nowhere. Think of the countless stories of people who, standing in moments of desperation, discovered solutions that reshaped their entire journey. Those revelations didn't emerge from panic or despair. They emerged from a shift in attention, from a mindset that refused to bow to appearances and instead trusted in the deeper law of life. Faith in divine abundance does not merely comfort the soul, it restores vision. It allows you to see opportunities others overlook, to make decisions that carry lasting impact, to walk through crisis without collapsing under its weight. And perhaps most importantly, it keeps the channel open for creativity to flow. Behind the scenes of every crisis, there is also an invitation. The invitation is to decide whether you will live as though appearances are final, or as though the invisible law of divine supply is still at work. Choosing the latter is not naive optimism. It is alignment with the very structure of life. Just as the oak seed does not question whether it contains the potential to become a tree, you need not question whether abundance exists. It is written into your being. The discipline lies in remembering this truth daily, tending to the inner soil, affirming the unseen until it becomes the seen. And so the journey continues, unveiling how invisible beginnings grow into visible transformations, how the constancy of thought shapes reality, and how faith restores not only prosperity, but the courage to move forward. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "I choose to nurture the seed." Practical spirituality, Cayce often reminded, is not about lofty ideas left floating in the air, but about the simple, daily choices that reprogram the way we think, feel, and act. One of the most powerful tools in this process is affirmation, because what we say to ourselves over and over again sinks deep into the subconscious and eventually becomes the lens through which we perceive the world. Whispering to yourself, "I am a child of God," might sound simple on the surface, but behind the scenes of the mind it begins to undo years of inner dialogue, filled with doubt, fear, and unworthiness. This is not empty repetition. It is the planting of a new seed. Each time you affirm it, the subconscious accepts it as truth, and slowly, the outer life reshapes itself to reflect that conviction. Transformation doesn't arrive as a sudden explosion. It emerges from these small, consistent decisions to align your inner narrative with divine reality. And yet Cayce was clear. Truly recognizing divine sonship does not inflate the ego. On the contrary, it dissolves the illusion of superiority, because once you see the spark of God within yourself, you begin to see it in everyone else. Humility is born not from self-belittlement, but from revelation. You walk differently when you know the same light that animates you, animates the stranger on the street, the friend beside you, even the one you might call enemy. The impact of this realization is extraordinary, because it changes not only how you relate to yourself, but how you approach others. Resentment fades when you recognize the hidden truth that you are dealing with another vessel of divinity. Compassion rises naturally because you understand that what you do to another, you ultimately do to yourself. This is the kind of humility that elevates instead of diminishes, a humility that honors the sacred in all. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because the sacred phrase "I am" holds a mystery that bridges human identity with divine essence. When Moses heard the words, "I am that I am," it was more than a name. It was existence declaring itself. Cayce taught that each time we use the words "I am," we are tapping into that same eternal force. The words we attach to "I am" are not casual descriptions. They are creative decrees. Saying "I am weak" or "I am lost" sets patterns into motion just as surely as saying "I am strong" or "I am guided." The subconscious does not argue. It obeys. And so, the decisions you make about what follows those two small words ripple out into your journey, shaping experiences, drawing circumstances, influencing the people who cross your path. This is why Cayce warned against careless use of language. Behind the scenes of every complaint, every self-deprecating remark, every angry declaration, there is creative energy taking shape. Words are not neutral. They are seeds planted in the soil of the subconscious, and once planted, they grow, whether you intended them to or not. The revelation here is profound. If you wish to transform your life, start by transforming what you attach to "I am." It is not about pretending to be something you are not, but about aligning with the deeper truth of what you already are. I am a child of God. I am whole. I am connected to the source of all wisdom. These affirmations are not wishful thinking. They are reminders of the eternal reality the soul has simply forgotten. And as this awareness deepens, humility and authority blend into one. Authority, because you realize the power of your word. Humility, because you understand the source is not the ego, but the divine flowing through you. To live with this balance is to walk a path of both strength and gentleness, to hold the knowledge that your words shape reality, while never losing sight of the fact that all power comes from the one behind all creation. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "I am aligned." The invisible power of words is one of those hidden truths that most people overlook, yet it shapes every layer of experience. Cayce emphasized that the phrase "I am" is not a casual expression, but a gateway, a creative command that sets forces in motion, whether we are conscious of it or not. Every time we attach an identity to those two words, we plant a seed in the fertile soil of the subconscious, and that seed will germinate. It doesn't matter if it's a word of strength or weakness, abundance or lack, health or sickness. The soil does not discriminate. It accepts whatever we sow and brings it forth in the journey of our lives. This is why careless speech has such impact, because behind the scenes of every thoughtless phrase, creation is already taking shape. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the danger of negative identities is subtle but powerful. When we say, "I am tired," "I am unlucky," or "I am unworthy," we are not merely describing how we feel in a moment. We are reinforcing a pattern that can become a prison. Identifying as weak or sick enslaves us because the subconscious begins to accept that identity as permanent truth, filtering every new experience through that lens. And once the filter is in place, decisions, opportunities, and even relationships bend themselves to match the narrative. On the other hand, when we replace these words with affirmations of competence, vitality, and wholeness, something remarkable happens. Latent strength, which had been lying dormant, awakens. The body responds differently. The mind finds new solutions. The spirit stirs with confidence. It is not self-deception. It is self-restoration, a return to the design that was always written within us. This process, however, requires vigilance because the subconscious mind is full of old scripts inherited from family, culture, and past experiences. Cayce warned that guilt and fear are often passed down silently, like hidden chains binding us to patterns that we did not consciously choose. Without awareness, we replay these scripts again and again, convincing ourselves that they are simply who we are. But this identity is not fixed. It is programmable, and the way we reprogram it is through divine affirmations that speak not to the problem, but to the truth of our being. When you declare, "I am whole," even in the face of illness, you are not denying reality. You are calling forth the higher reality that has the power to reshape it. When you say, "I am guided," even in confusion, you are aligning with the deeper intelligence that waits behind the veil of appearances. Behind the scenes of the mind, this reprogramming takes time. Just as old weeds do not vanish after one clearing, old beliefs often resurface, demanding attention. But each time you replace fear with faith, doubt with affirmation, you weaken the hold of the old script and strengthen the new one. The transformation is gradual, but undeniable. Slowly, the subconscious begins to reflect the divine identity you affirm, and your outer world follows suit. This is the true power of rewriting the subconscious. It allows us to escape the inherited limits of the past and step into the freedom of our divine inheritance. And so the journey of self-awareness becomes a sacred practice of speech and thought, where each use of "I am" becomes an act of creation, each affirmation a decision that shapes the future. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "I am rewriting my story." The subconscious mind, Cayce explained, is like a silent architect working behind the scenes, always building, always shaping, yet never questioning the instructions it receives. When we affirm, "I am," the subconscious doesn't pause to debate whether what we've said is true or false. It simply accepts it as fact and begins constructing reality around that blueprint. This is why the words we attach to "I am" carry such immense impact. They bypass logic, they bypass skepticism, and they drop directly into the fertile soil where creation takes root. If you say, "I am overwhelmed," the subconscious goes to work reinforcing chaos. If you declare, "I am at peace," the subconscious arranges inner and outer conditions to reflect that state. It does not filter, it does not argue, it does not reject. It obeys without question. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because the beauty of this truth is revealed not only in theory, but in the simplest, most ordinary parts of life. Cayce once described how even a housewife, caught in the daily rhythm of managing her home, experienced transformation when she shifted her inner script. Where she once affirmed frustration and disorder, she began affirming harmony and joy. To her surprise, the kitchen, once a place of tension, started to reflect the new atmosphere she carried inside. Meals came together more smoothly, her energy felt lighter, and her interactions with her family softened into something more graceful. This was not magic in the sensational sense. It was the natural consequence of aligning thought with divine truth. The hidden truth here is that transformation doesn't wait for perfect conditions or monumental events. It begins in the ordinary, in the background of daily life, when the subconscious is given a new script to follow. And this is where Cayce's insight into the Christ mind becomes so vital. Paul's words, "We have the mind of Christ," are not a metaphor or a lofty aspiration. They describe a universal spiritual architecture that every human being can access. The Christ mind is a template of perception, a way of seeing that cuts through illusion and reveals reality as it truly is. To step into this perception, is to see beyond appearances of lack, conflict, and limitation, and to recognize the divine order that continues to flow underneath it all. It is a mindset that brings clarity where confusion reigned, peace where turmoil once held sway, and wisdom where doubt used to dominate. The journey into the Christ mind is not about abandoning individuality, but about allowing the higher pattern to guide it. Imagine perception as a window. When it's clouded by fear, resentment, or guilt, the view outside is distorted. But when the glass is cleaned, the light pours through, revealing the world as it really is. The Christ mind is that clear window, the template that allows us to interpret life, not through the lens of separation, but through the lens of unity. And once this perception is awakened, even the smallest moments of daily living, like preparing a meal, speaking to a friend, or making a decision, become infused with a depth and purpose that were previously invisible. This is why Cayce stressed that spiritual truth is not hidden in far-off places or reserved for saints alone. It is present in the subconscious mind, waiting to be directed, and it is present in the Christ consciousness, waiting to be recognized. When these two realities meet, when the subconscious is programmed with divine affirmations and perception is aligned with Christ's mind, life unfolds in ways that feel both natural and miraculous. If this speaks to you, write in the comments, "My mind is being renewed." The Christ, Cayce explained, is not bound to history or confined to the life of one man 2,000 years ago. Christ is an eternal dimension, a pattern woven into the very fabric of existence, waiting to be recognized and embodied by anyone who dares to align with it. Jesus was the perfect expression of that pattern, the living demonstration of what humanity can become when thought, word, and action harmonize with divine truth. But the hidden truth here is that this model was never meant to be admired from a distance. It was meant to be lived. The Christ pattern remains accessible as a timeless spiritual architecture, available to guide anyone willing to shift their mindset and open themselves to transformation. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because what Cayce called the engineering of Christ consciousness is not abstract mysticism, but a practical design. It rests on three pillars: calm within, authority in words, and manifestation in reality. When Jesus faced storms, he slept in peace because his inner state was unshaken. When he spoke, his words carried weight because they were not scattered by doubt or fear. And when he acted, reality itself seemed to bend to his intention because his perception was fully aligned with divine law. This is not a formula for control, but a revelation of harmony. The same engineering remains available to us when we choose stillness over panic, conviction over hesitation, and faith over appearances. The impact is immediate. Our words begin to carry power, not because of volume or force, but because they are rooted in alignment. And yet, Christ consciousness is never cold authority. At Lazarus's tomb, Jesus wept with compassion, even as he commanded life to return. This union of empathy and creative certainty reveals the essence of divine love in action. The Christ mind does not separate feeling from power. It brings them together. To weep with those who mourn while simultaneously calling forth resurrection is to embody both humanity and divinity in one seamless act. This is the balance the world often misses, believing that strength means detachment, or that compassion means helplessness. In truth, the Christ pattern shows us that real transformation happens when love and authority walk hand in hand. Think about the impact this has on everyday life, behind the scenes of every conflict, every moment of despair, every hidden struggle. There lies an opportunity to embody this same union, to bring comfort with your presence while also affirming a higher possibility, to acknowledge the pain without surrendering to it, to carry the mindset that refuses to collapse under appearances, yet does not lose tenderness for those caught in them. This is how the eternal dimension of Christ becomes visible in ordinary human moments, through the decisions we make, the words we speak, the compassion we extend, and the certainty we hold. The journey into this dimension is not about imitating miracles, but about adopting the same consciousness that made them possible, the calm that anchors the storm, the authority that gives weight to speech, the love that restores dignity. These are not locked away in Scripture, but waiting to be expressed again and again. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "I choose to live the Christ pattern." The inner voice of Christ. Consciousness is never frantic, never manipulative, and never rooted in fear. It speaks with a clarity that cuts through the noise of the mind, calm and direct, like a gentle current moving beneath turbulent waters. Unlike the voice of guilt or the echo of inherited fear, this voice does not condemn. It guides. It whispers truth in a way that restores, rather than breaks, heals rather than wounds. Cayce emphasized that this is the true compass of the soul, and yet, because it is quiet, it is so, often drowned out by the louder voices of worry, resentment, and self-criticism. Learning to recognize this calm directive requires stillness, a willingness to pause long enough to hear what has been present all along. And when we allow this guidance to shape our decisions, the impact becomes visible in the transformation of daily life. Choices feel aligned, timing feels more natural, and even challenges become less threatening because they are framed by a deeper sense of order. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because one of the clearest demonstrations of Christ consciousness is the practice of forgiveness. Too often, forgiveness is misunderstood as excusing harmful actions or pretending that pain never occurred. But Cayce taught that forgiveness in the Christ mind is something very different. It is alignment. When we forgive, we release ourselves and others from the weight of distorted perception, freeing both parties to step back into truth. Holding resentment is like carrying a heavy stone through every step of your journey. It slows you, shapes your posture, and drains your energy. Forgiveness, then, is not weakness, but liberation. It is the decision to put down the stone, to recognize that your identity is not bound to the wound, and that the one who harmed you is not bound to the role of enemy forever. This shift has a hidden power. It reopens channels of life and allows divine flow to move freely again. And often, it is in this release that healing, emotional, spiritual, even physical, begins to unfold. Cayce also revealed that forgiveness restores us to a place where service becomes not just an act, but a natural expression of divine power. Jesus embodied this truth in one of his most striking demonstrations, washing the feet of his disciples. On the surface it was a humble gesture, but behind the scenes it carried a revelation. True authority is not displayed in dominance, but in service. The greatest impact a soul can have is not in commanding others, but in lifting them. This inversion of worldly power shows that the highest vibration of leadership is compassion in action. Serving others, whether in small, unseen ways or in great visible ones, is the mark of authentic strength. It is the Christ pattern expressed in its purest form. When you look closely, you begin to see how these elements intertwine. The calm voice of truth guiding your inner journey, the liberating force of forgiveness releasing hidden chains, and the decision to serve as the most powerful act of authority. Together they form a mindset that transforms not only personal life, but also the collective atmosphere around us. And the more one embodies this consciousness, the more it becomes clear that divine power is never about control, but about restoring, healing, and uplifting. If this speaks to you, write in the comments, "I choose to serve with love." Training the mind to Christ's vision is less about memorizing verses and more about immersing yourself in the essence behind them. Cayce described how meditating on gospel scenes, truly placing yourself within them, has the power to shift the way your own challenges are perceived. Imagine not just reading about Jesus calming the storm, but sitting in that boat, feeling the wind's rage, the water crashing, and then experiencing the sudden stillness when his words cut through chaos. By revisiting these moments, not as distant stories but as living patterns, you begin to absorb the consciousness that made them possible. This practice is not escape, it is transformation. The storm in the gospel becomes the storm in your own life, and the calm Jesus carried becomes the calm available to you. In this way, Scripture ceases to be history and becomes revelation, a direct tool to reshape the mindset with which you meet your own journey. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because Cayce insisted that the Christ mind is not only about personal growth, it is a collective influence. Every thought we choose to align with divine law radiates beyond the boundary of self and contributes to the mental atmosphere of society. When one person replaces bitterness with forgiveness or fear with trust, the shift is not isolated. It adds new energy to the shared field of human thought. Behind the scenes of world events, movements, and even cultural changes lies this invisible current. It may look as if history is driven by politics, economics, or chance, but beneath the surface, it is the collective mindset of humanity that gives rise to those outer expressions. This hidden truth places immense responsibility on each individual, because your personal alignment is never just personal. It is part of the architecture of the whole. The implications of this are staggering. What if the anger we harbor quietly contributes to the very conflicts we condemn? What if the compassion we practice in silence carries an impact far greater than we can measure? Cayce's insight reveals that nothing is wasted. Every act of inner alignment contributes to the larger tapestry. It shifts the possibilities available to humanity, even if the connection is invisible. And so, when you choose divine thought in the privacy of your own heart, you are also reshaping the climate of human consciousness itself. This is how transformation spreads, quietly, steadily, through decisions made in moments that no one else may see, yet whose echoes ripple outward in ways we cannot always trace. The laws at play here are profound, and Cayce distinguished them clearly. The law of mind states that thought creates form, that ideas shape the reality we experience. It is the mechanism through which attention and belief solidify into conditions. But beyond the mental law lies the divine law, which ensures that ultimate outcomes bend toward goodness, even when the surface looks distorted. The mental law can create both harmony and chaos depending on what is sown, but the divine law weaves through it, guiding the journey back toward alignment with truth. This is why appearances can be misleading. What looks like loss may be a clearing, what seems like delay may be a protection, and what feels like failure may be the soil from which something greater emerges. Together, these laws remind us that while our thoughts are powerful, they are never the final authority. The human mind shapes forms, but divine law ensures that the deeper purpose is never lost. Recognizing this balance frees us from both arrogance and despair. We hold responsibility for our thoughts, yet we can rest in the assurance that there is a higher order constantly working for restoration and alignment. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "I choose divine alignment." Fear, Cayce explained, is one of the most convincing illusions, because it feels so real in the moment that we forget its true nature. Yet, like any other thought, fear is creative. It plants seeds in the subconscious and begins to generate conditions that mirror its vibration. The very outcomes we dread often take shape because we gave them space to grow inside us long before they appeared outside us. Fear is not just an emotional state, it is a form of misplaced faith, a belief in the power of what we do not want. This hidden truth is unsettling but also liberating, because once we recognize fear as a misuse of creative law, we can decide to redirect our focus. The same energy that builds fear can be transmuted into vision, trust, and alignment, reshaping not only outcomes, but the inner journey itself. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because the antidote to fear is not denial, but alignment. Aligning with divine law means fixing our attention, acceptance, and expectation on God's perfection, not on appearances that pass. This is not naive optimism. It is deliberate synchronization with a higher order that continues to flow even when the surface looks chaotic. When you focus your thought on wholeness instead of fracture, peace instead of turmoil, abundance instead of lack, you begin to harmonize with divine will. And the impact of this alignment is visible both within and without. Internally, the heart grows steady and the mind clear. Externally, doors open, circumstances shift, and what once felt impossible begins to reveal new pathways. Cayce showed that the alignment of thought with divine truth is not about ignoring problems, but about transforming the lens through which we see them. When we change the lens, the picture itself begins to change. The discipline required for this alignment is what Cayce called mental hygiene, a concept as practical as it is spiritual. Just as the body requires cleanliness and care to stay healthy, the mind requires selective attention and vigilance to stay aligned with truth. Practicing silence allows the clutter of constant noise to settle, so that the inner voice of guidance can rise. Choosing selective thought means refusing to entertain resentment, fear, or judgment, because each of these is a seed that will eventually bear fruit. Vigilance is the watchful awareness that notices when an old pattern tries to creep back in, and gently but firmly redirects it toward truth. This is not repression, it is stewardship. It is treating the mind as sacred ground, because every thought planted there will eventually shape the conditions of your journey. Think of how transformative this mindset can be when applied consistently. Behind the scenes of every great achievement, every lasting peace, and every healing, there is someone who practiced mental hygiene, who chose not to let fear dominate, who maintained alignment even when appearances seemed overwhelming. The revelations of such practice become visible in time. Relationships soften, health strengthens, and opportunities emerge not because circumstances changed by accident, but because the inner atmosphere shifted first. And so the invitation is clear: to see fear, not as an unavoidable master but as a signal that it is time to realign, to use attention consciously, to cultivate silence as a source of strength, and to guard the mind as the fertile soil of creation. If this speaks to you, write in the comments, "I choose alignment over fear." Scientific prayer, as Cayce described it, is not about repeating empty words or bargaining with a distant God. It is a spiritual technology, a process of gathering the scattered energy of attention and focusing it deliberately. When you bring your awareness into alignment, affirm your true identity with I am. Visualize the desired outcome with faith, and then release it into divine wisdom without clinging. You are activating one of the most profound dynamics of creation. This isn't wishful thinking, it's conscious participation in a universal law. The hidden truth is that prayer works not because we beg, but because we align, and once aligned, the subconscious and the divine law begin working together in ways that ripple through every layer of reality. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because imagination itself plays a sacred role in this process. Too often dismissed as fantasy or childish daydreaming, imagination is in fact the blueprint of creation. Cayce emphasized that imagination is the design studio of the soul, the place where the invisible is sketched before it becomes visible. Faith does not wait until results appear. Faith sees the end from the beginning, holds the picture in the mind's eye, and trusts the law to bring it forth in form. This is not about controlling life, but about cooperating with it, using imagination not to escape reality, but to co-create with it. Transformation happens when you stop treating imagination as a distraction and begin to recognize it as a tool, a space where divine intention and human participation meet. And this is where the word of power enters with striking force. Words are not mere labels, they are decrees. When you speak, you are not just describing the world, you are shaping it. This is especially true when words are joined with the creative force of I am. Every declaration following those two words is like a command issued to both the subconscious and the spiritual field around you. I am strong, I am guided, I am whole. These are not just affirmations, they are energetic instructions that call unseen forces into cooperation. The impact of such speech is not always immediate, but it is cumulative. Behind the scenes, reality begins to bend around the words spoken in alignment with truth. The danger, of course, lies in the careless use of speech. Words of anger, doubt, or self-condemnation carry the same creative law, planting seeds that grow into experiences of limitation. This is why Cayce urged vigilance, because every word carries a vibration, and every vibration creates resonance. To speak negatively is to shape negatively, even when we don't intend to. Yet the revelation here is liberating, because it means that at any moment we can choose to reshape reality by reshaping the words we allow to leave our lips. Speech becomes not a casual outlet but a sacred act, a decision point where we either align with divine order or scatter our energy into confusion. Think about the transformation this understanding can bring into your journey. If prayer is the conscious gathering of thought and release into divine wisdom, if imagination is the blueprint where faith rehearses the unseen, and if words are the decree that sets law into motion, then every moment of awareness becomes a moment of creation. Nothing is trivial. Nothing is wasted. Each thought, each image, each word carries impact. To live with this awareness is to realize that you are constantly participating in the hidden architecture of your own destiny. And so, the invitation is not only to pray differently but to live differently, to treat imagination as holy ground and words as sacred instruments. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "My words shape my world." Love, Cayce explained, is not merely an emotion we stumble into or a fleeting feeling that comes and goes depending on circumstance. Love is the ultimate causal force, the deepest law of the universe, the hidden truth that ties together both the mental and divine principles. Behind every transformation, every revelation, every act of healing, it is love that stands as the central power. Thoughts alone can shape forms, and divine law ensures alignment with goodness. But love is what harmonizes the two, weaving them into a seamless current that carries life forward. Without love, even the most disciplined thought remains brittle. With love, even the smallest action becomes charged with creative authority. It is the binding energy, the resonance that unites heaven and earth, mind and spirit, word and form. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because love, as Cayce revealed, is not passive, it is active. Alignment. It is not sentimentality or indulgence, but the decision to recognize divinity in yourself and in others, and to act in accordance with that recognition. Love is the vibration that heals resentment by dissolving it into compassion, that transforms fear by transmuting it into trust, that turns chaos into order by aligning it with divine rhythm. Its impact is not abstract. It is measurable in the way it shifts atmosphere. Walk into a room filled with judgment, and you feel the constriction. Walk into a room where love is present and you feel the expansion. This is the causal force at work. It doesn't wait for permission. It radiates, influences, and restores wherever it is allowed to flow. The hidden truth is that many people search for power in knowledge, control, or achievement, yet overlook the quiet force that exceeds them all. Love is what gives knowledge its wisdom, control its purpose, and achievement its meaning. Without it, success is empty, and influence is hollow. With it, even the most modest life radiates a transformative presence. Love does not need a platform to be powerful. It carries its own authority, shaping outcomes behind the scenes in ways that logic cannot always trace. When you choose love, you are choosing the highest law, one that transcends circumstance and bends even the most resistant conditions toward harmony. This is why Cayce described love as the healing power at the core of all creation. Healing is not just the mending of bodies but the restoration of unity wherever division has taken hold. Love heals by reminding us that separation is an illusion, that all things are expressions of the same source. When applied to relationships, it restores connection. When applied to fear, it restores peace. When applied to the self, it restores dignity and worth. Love does not erase difficulty, but it redefines it, infusing challenges with the possibility of growth and conflict with the seed of reconciliation. To live with this understanding is to recognize that love is not optional, it is essential. It is not a virtue we add to life once everything else is secure. It is the very foundation that makes everything else possible. And once you experience this law in action, you realize that love is not fragile. It is the strongest force there is, more enduring than resentment, more creative than fear, more powerful than doubt. It is the language of the soul, the architecture of the divine, and the energy that keeps the entire universe in motion. And so the journey of aligning with love is not about waiting to feel it, but about deciding to embody it, moment by moment, thought by thought, word by word. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "Love is my foundation." If you've stayed with me until this point, I hope the journey we shared opened space for new reflections and perhaps even a shift in the way you see yourself and the world around you. If this kind of content speaks to you, I'd love to invite you to subscribe so you can keep walking with me through these insights and discoveries. We build more value together each time. And since you've made it all the way to the end, leave me a comment with the phrase, "I'm with you until the end," so I know you were here for the full experience. A like on the video is also a wonderful way to let me know this resonated with you and helps keep our connection flowing. And before you go, there's a video right here that beautifully complements this topic. Click and continue with me over there.